Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, November 10th, 2023. Time for our end of the week intelligence community roundtable with my dear friends Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Second time this week for each of you, and much appreciated. I want each of you to weigh in on this for me and for our audience, please. Why was Secretary Blinken's trip to the Middle East last weekend such a profound and dismal, hard to say with a straight face, failure? Larry first.
Oh, well, he rebuffed, stiff-armed at every turn. He was Bibi Netanyahu have a joint press conference on his own, and then 30 minutes after Blinken finished, Netanyahu came out and said, everything that guy said is wrong. He just disagreed with him. Then he goes to Amman and meets with the foreign ministers of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, I think UAE, and as well the Palestinians. Now, when it came time for the joint press conference, those guys couldn't wait to be out there on stage with Blinken, not because they were going to go, oh, yeah, we think Blinken's great, because they were lambasting him. And there's nothing better that played better publicly than be able to beat up Blinken in front of the Arab press. Then he goes to Turkey. The Turks sent the equivalent of the deputy secretary, Pete Buttigieg, to the airport to greet him. Okay. the people had to look the name up. They didn't even know who it was. And then he gets to meet later with the foreign minister of Turkey. That's it. And just look at a week prior to that, the Iranians went. They got greeted by the foreign minister of Turkey. He gets the Iranian gets ushered in to see Erdogan. So bottom line is, at every turn, Blinken got the equivalent of the single finger salute that starts in the middle.
Right. Ray, what are your thoughts on this? I would imagine you have similar views, but why such a public and notorious snub? This is not like the King of Jordan refusing to meet Joe Biden. This is a public humiliation.
Well, it is, and it has to do with the brief that he was given to argue no ceasefire. Maybe no pauses either when he's with the Israelis, and then he's with the others. Well, maybe a pause. And then Netanyahu says, yeah, maybe here and there for a couple minutes here and a couple minutes there. And maybe, but after we get the hostages back, I mean, the prospect of having to argue that there shouldn't be a ceasefire to stop genocide, that there shouldn't even be a humanitarian pause to stop the genocide. I mean, humanitarian genocide. I mean, there's an oxymoron that the Arabs get quite well. American people don't get it just yet. But it all has to do with Blinken being just as delusional as Zelensky, because he really seems to believe that the U.S. is so exceptional that it can work its will not only on the Arabs, but on Netanyahu. And Netanyahu thumbs his nose at Blinken and says, no, Blinken's got it all wrong. We don't want a ceasefire, and we certainly don't want a pause. And then Blinken announces, this is his words, the Israelis have told us, got that, guys? The Israelis have told us that they're against the ceasefire, and we support the Israelis 100%. The Israelis have told us. My God, what have we come to?
So, I mean, this is a tightrope, Larry, that cannot effectively be walked. How can the United States government at the same time be in favor of a ceasefire as it supports unambiguously and without hesitation what the Israelis are doing? I mean, stated differently, is there any government in the West that doesn't recognize that what the Israelis are doing is a war crime, and that because they're using American military equipment and ammunition, the American government is complicit in a war crime as well?
Well, there are a few other countries, the United Kingdom in particular, are still not on the war, willing to call it necessarily a war crime. But what this is highlighting is that the United States has lost tremendous diplomatic stature around the world as a result of this incident. And there are reports now coming out that the ambassadors, particularly from many of the Arab Muslim nations, are communicating back to Blinken's Secretary of State that these governments are furious, angry at the United States. Now, in this world, you only really have sort of two ways to get things done. Either you're militarily so strong and so powerful that you can coerce people, or you can economically coerce them, or through diplomacy, you can ask them and try to find out a basis of cooperation. The United States has seen its power on both the economic and military fronts erode significantly. And so that leaves us with trying to do diplomacy, and Blinken's a failure at it. Biden's a failure at it. And as a result, the United States has really sort of painted itself in a corner.
So, Ray, how embarrassing is it for Blinken, for the Department of State, and for the Biden administration, for CIA Director Bill Burns effectively to go to the same places that Blinken had just gone to 2 days after Blinken got home? Ostensibly, I would imagine, and you correct me if I'm wrong or amplify on this, please, as you see fit, to do what Blinken failed to do.
Well, Judge, I'm going to cite an instructive apocryphal story about a West Point reunion 30 years after graduation, where a major general confronted a fellow that had left after 5 years. And he said, "What are you doing now, Elmer?" And Elmer says, "Oh, I've got a job with the circus." "What do you do?" "Well, I clean up after the elephants, after the performance." I said, "Elmer, you come work for Raytheon where I am. You don't have to do it." And Elmer said, "What? And get away from showbiz? Leave showbiz?" That's Bill Burns to a T. He didn't want to leave showbiz. Okay, so he's cleaning up after Blinken, after this circus, aptly described by my friends. This is a really a debacle, and it all has to do. And again, I mean, it seems strange, but Blinken really believes that he can work his will because he's the United States, not only with the Arabs but the Israelis, and he can't. And so here goes Bill Burns to clean up and then to give Biden the appearance that they're working really hard on the hostages. And who does he show up in Qatar with? With the head of Mossad. Now there they are. Whoop, there he's right in the corner there, the head of Mossad. So the head of the CIA and the head of Mossad are openly pressuring the Qatar people to release the hostages.
So how
that's
can
some of the Hamas people are.
Ray, how can the director of CIA get something done that the Secretary of State could not get done?
Well, he can't. He could do that if it was a secret sort of thing. He has performed, that is, Bill Burns has, in the past, some rather discreet diplomacy having to do with the accord on Iran's nuclear weaponry. So he's been able to do this, but that hasn't been on the front page with together with the head of Mossad. So, this is just an advertisement for Biden to say, "Look, what we're doing, we can to get the hostages out," and it is for Burns to try to clean up. Now he had an audience with the head of Egypt, Al-Sisi, and it went really, really bad. The head of intelligence was there, but Al-Sisi says, "Look, the meeting touched on regional issues." Al-Sisi reiterated that we need a ceasefire right away, and we need to facilitate unfettered flow of humanitarian aid. And Mr. Burns said that we're committed to continued communication channels with Egypt. So, if he's going to try to do diplomacy,
he didn't get the first base.
That's exactly right.
Larry, It's now a month after October 7th. Has any more intel come in of which you are aware and which you can share, indicating what the Israelis and perhaps Prime Minister Netanyahu himself knew on the evening of the 6th?
Yeah, I don't think they really knew. I think they were caught completely unawares. And, some have speculated that this was a setup, that they allowed it to happen in order to justify this crackdown on the Palestinians and to take out Hamas. But when you look back at the immediate reaction, the reacted with panic on the 7th in response to those attacks. And a large number of the casualties of both the people at the rave in the desert, people being held hostage in some of the various kibbutzim, they were killed by Israel, not by
Larry,
Hamas.
say that again, please.
Yeah, the Israeli Defense Force and Israeli Air Force killed a lot of the hostages, as well as members in the reaction to attack Hamas on the various kibbutzim and military outposts.
Ray, why would the IDF kill Israelis, Ray?
This wouldn't be the first time, Judge. The requirements of appearing to be very strong, to moving very quickly against Hamas. If there are Israeli hostages there, well, that's really too bad. We don't like to kill Israeli hostages, but that's the way the Israelis look at this. I just like to go back once again to this business about the U.S. being exceptional, able to work its will. We know that after the Iraq War, the first one, 1991, Wolfowitz was interviewed by a top general, and he said, look, what we learned from this war is that we can do whatever we want, and Russia can't stop us, 91. So 2015, Russia stops us. Putin goes to the president, Obama, and he says, look, we're not going to tolerate what you're doing in Syria. We're going to enter that fray. We're sending ships and we're sending planes, and we're not going to let you do that, okay? And we'd like you to work out a deal with Lavrov, that is, Kerry and Lavrov, so there'd be a ceasefire. And they did. 11 months ceasefire. Guess what happened? The U.S. Air Force sabotaged that ceasefire.
Right.
John Kerry comes home, and what does he say? And this, I want to do this just to show how delusional these people are in thinking. Back in 2016 now, what they can do. Here's Kerry. He's asked about this. What happened to that ceasefire? He says, this is a quote, Syria is as complicated as anything I've ever seen in public life, in the sense that there are probably about 6 wars going on at the same time: Kurd against Kurd, Kurd against Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Saudi, everybody against ISIL, people against Assad, Nusra. This is as mixed up, sectarian and civil war and strategic and proxy. So it's very, very difficult. Get this. It's very, very difficult to be able to align the forces the way we want them.
Wow.
Now, Steve Clemens asked him, so in the middle of that, why did you think you could get a ceasefire? There wasn't an answer, but the answer really is sotto voce, because we are exceptional and we can do these things, even though we don't know what the hell we're doing.
Larry, you were talking a few minutes ago about the Israelis killing their own people, and I may have cut you off. Had you finished what you were saying?
Well, no, I'm just going to point out that it's not, I'm not offering an opinion on this. It's been well reported by Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper. There's video footage out of Israeli pilots flying Apache helicopters that are blowing up vehicles, civilian vehicles. And there's no way to identify when you're flying like that, whether it's friend or foe. They don't have an international friend or foe identifier on those cars. And a lot of the footage that was after that, those attacks showed the rubble around houses and buildings. It could only be caused by tanks, not by any weapons that the Hamas people were carrying. Similarly, the burned, charred vehicles were caused by Israeli airstrikes. So just it's a lot more complicated, even though they wanted to try to present it as a strict black and white, that Israel was clean hands, Hamas completely dirty hands, black and white. It's unfortunately, it's a lot more complicated.
Is this what they call a Hannibal directive, Larry?
Yeah. That goes back to
kill your own people so that they cannot be taken hostage. Kill them.
Right. In 2014, there were a couple of Israeli soldiers taken hostage, which led to the last attempt by Israel to go into Gaza, and it was pretty costly to them back then. So they sort of sent the word that if you're taken hostage, you may wind up dead. And in fact, the evidence, the testimony, eyewitness testimony by Israeli survivors asserts that it was the IDF forces that were shooting them, not Hamas.
I want to talk to the two of you about the nature of the relationship between Israel and the United States. And as a springboard for that conversation, I want you to watch a very famous, now 20-year-old interview. You'll know the interviewer, and you'll certainly know the interviewee.
You make the observation in your book, and you say that you have said it many times when you were president of the United States, that no president is ever going to desert Israel, right?
Correct. I put it more bluntly. I said, as I told congressional leaders during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no American president will let Israel go down the tube.
All right.
Democrat or Republican, it's not an issue.
That is stated fairly categorically, and yet in your book you make it clear at the same time that Israel really is not of any enormous strategic value to the United States anymore.
That's correct.
So why then would the United States continue to burden itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis, jeopardize possibly young American fighting men, when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the
value?
United States is concerned by more than strategic values. That's maybe a weakness, but it's the way we are. And there are moral issues involved here. We don't have an alliance with Israel, as you know. They're not an ally of the United States in a technical sense. But we have a bond to Israel that's much stronger. It's a moral commitment. A moral commitment because of what happened during the Holocaust, and a moral commitment because it is a democracy, the only democracy in that area.
Ray, is it a moral commitment or is it American domestic politics?
It's American domestic politics. Witness the fact that about 80% of our legislature is really 100% behind what Israel is doing now in Gaza. One important point here, Judge, that doesn't come through is that Nixon himself and Kissinger offered the Israelis a mutual defense treaty after they took it on the chin from the Arabs for a little while in 1973. The Israelis finally prevailed with our help, but we went, and I know this for sure, we went to the Israelis and said, look, we don't want this to happen again. We'll offer you a bilateral defense alliance. That way, no Arab in his right mind is going to take off after you the way they did just the last year in 1973. What do you think? And the Israelis said, and this is precious, okay? The Israelis said, oh, isn't that sweet? But, thanks, but no thanks. We prefer it the way it is now. Why? Because they prefer not to have to alert the United States when they're going to take off after Syria or after Iraq or something like that. They like it just the way it is. They prefer to act for forgiveness rather than permission, and it's just fine. The WAGs say that they were offered at the same time to become a 51st state of the United States, but that was rejected out of hand because then they would only have 2 senators.
Wow. Larry, was Nixon right then? And if so, is what he said then still true today?
It's still true today. I mean, he was correct in terms of describing what the political reality was in the United States. What has changed is there is a larger presence and representative of the Palestinians in the United States than there were say 30, 40 years ago. So they now have a voice. They're still a minority voice. They're still not the major political player that the AIPAC lobby is, for example. But it has changed the dynamic a little bit. So you're seeing larger anti-Israel protests today, more than you've ever seen in previous conflicts, going back to whether we're talking the one in 2006 or 1973 or 67.
But when you speak out against Israel on the floor of the House of Representatives, Ray, you can be censured.
Oh, you will be censured, as happened to Representative Tlaib. I hope everyone has a chance to look at her speech after she was censored, where she said, "Why do you not care so much for Palestinian children as you do for Israeli children?" And that's about what it comes down to. Racism does play a huge role in all this. Palestinians don't look like us. Most Israelis do.
Larry, I'll give you the last word.
Well, a lot of this boils down to people are Semites. The reality is all this anti-Palestinian sentiment, it's anti-Semitism. They are Semites as well. People forget that the entire concept of Semitism comes from Shem, a son of Noah. And out of that Shem, you get Arabs, you get Persians, and you get Jews. So, what we really have going on right now is the bloodiest family feud you could ever imagine. And people need to sort of wake up, back off, and recognize we need to stop the demonization of both sides and the hatred that is so virulent right now. Because, as Ray has commented upon, if you could listen to the House of Representatives or to the Senate, you've got senators and members of Congress that are calling for terrible things to happen to the Palestinian people. And all that's going to do is increase more hatred towards the United States, which I don't think serves our interest.
Gentlemen, always a pleasure, no matter how unpleasant the topics may be. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you both early next week.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Judge.
Thank you, my dear friends. Just approaching 233,000 in our subscriptions. We're going to hit 240 by Thanksgiving and 250 by Christmas. From my heart to yours. Thank you. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.